My name is Giselle Thompson, and at 65 years old, I never expected to fight for the right to see my only grandson. That day in the community center, as she stood accusing me of being an unfit grandmother, I felt my world collapse. They all believed her polished lies over my lifetime of love. What she never expected was the small device in my purse that would change everything. The truth has a way of burning through even the most carefully crafted deceptions. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you value family truth. After 40 years as a pediatric nurse in Portland, I thought I understood children better than most. My husband Thomas and I had raised our daughter Amelia with love, patience, and just enough structure to help her become the compassionate elementary school teacher she is today. When Thomas passed from heart failure 8 years ago, Amelia became my rock, my connection to life beyond grief. I still remember the day Amelia brought Warren Jackson home to meet me. He was kind, if somewhat passive, a software engineer with gentle eyes and a genuine smile. Their wedding 2 years later was small but beautiful, and that was when I first met Judith Warren's mother. Judith Jackson arrived at the rehearsal dinner in a tailored navy dress, pearls gleaming at her throat. A wealthy widow, she was well known in her community for charity work and social leadership. Her handshake was firm, her smile practiced. So wonderful to finally meet the woman who raised such a lovely bride, she said, eyes quickly, assessing my simple dress and sensible shoes. Warren has told me so much about your quaint family traditions. I brushed off the slight condescension. After all, this was a celebration, and I was gaining a son, not competing with his mother. When Lucas was born 2 years into their marriage, my world expanded with joy. He had Amelia's curious eyes and Thomas's dimpled smile, so bright, so eager to explore everything around him. When Amelia returned to teaching, I gladly offered to watch Lucas 3 days a week. Those Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday mornings became sacred to me. We developed our own little routines, Lucas and I. Tuesdays were for the Children's Museum, Wednesdays for story time at the library, and Thursdays for the park, weather permitting. He would squeal with delight when I arrived, arms reaching up for a hug that felt like pure sunshine. Judith remained pleasant during Lucas's first years, though she lived in Seattle and visited only occasionally. Then came what I now call the sugar incident. Lucas was 3, happily munching a homemade oatmeal cookie after lunch. A cookie. Before his nap, Judith appeared in my kitchen doorway during an unexpected visit. Sugar disrupts sleep patterns in developing brains. I have some articles I can send you. I smiled tightly. One small cookie with natural ingredients won't hurt him. I've raised children and cared for thousands more as a nurse. Well, pediatric protocols have advanced significantly in recent years, she replied, her tone suggesting my knowledge was as outdated as last season's fashion. 2 weeks later, Judith announced she was moving to Portland to be closer to family. That was when everything began to change. It started with minor criticisms. My toys were too old-fashioned. My sunscreen application wasn't thorough enough. I fed Lucas too many carbohydrates. Then came the playground incident. Lucas, like any 4-year-old, tripped while running toward the slide. He skinned his knee and bruised his elbow. Nothing serious, nothing any active child hasn't experienced. I cleaned him up, applied bandages, and comforted him until he was ready to play again. That evening, Judith arrived at Amelia's house while I was still there. "Let me see that bruise," she said to Lucas, phone already in hand. She took photos, her brow furrowed with concern. "How exactly did this happen? Was anyone watching him closely?" "Kids fall, Judith," I said. I was right there. Warren looked uncomfortably between us before deferring to his mother. Maybe we should be more careful on the playground equipment, Mom. It was the first time he had called me Mom instead of Giselle, and it wasn't lost on me that he did so while subtly criticizing my care. Soon Judith began appearing whenever I had Lucas. She would arrive unannounced at the library, the museum, the park, always with her phone ready, always watching our interactions with narrowed eyes. Amelia, who had always trusted my childcare implicitly, began asking more questions. Did Lucas nap today? For how long exactly? What did he eat? All of it, was he fussy? For Lucas's 4th birthday, I spent weeks crocheting a special blanket with his favorite animals hidden in the pattern. When he unwrapped it, his eyes lit up, and he immediately wrapped it around his shoulders. Look, Mommy, a superhero cape with animals. Then he opened Judith's gift, a child-sized electric car he could drive around the yard, complete with working headlights and an MP3 player. My blanket was quickly forgotten in the excitement. Some things never go out of style, Judith said, with a meaningful glance at my gift, and some things definitely do. That afternoon, Lucas ran across the yard to show me how fast his car could go. He tripped on an uneven patch of grass and skinned his knee. Before I could even reach him, Judith was there, phone out, documenting the injury. He was running to you, she said, her voice heavy with implication. The text messages started coming more frequently during my time with Lucas. How is he doing? Amelia would ask at 10 in the morning, though she had just dropped him off at 9. Has he had his snack yet at 11? Is he getting tired at noon? I had cared for Lucas on Tuesdays through Thursdays since he was 6 months old, but suddenly my daughter seemed to need constant reassurance about my caregiving abilities. Then came the first cancellation. We have other arrangements for Tuesday, Amelia texted on Monday evening. No explanation, no rescheduling. When I called to ask if everything was all right, she sounded distracted. Everything's fine, Mom. Judith offered to take him to the children's science exhibit, the one we were planning to visit next week. Oh, was that your plan? I didn't remember. Anyway, it works out better this way with my schedule. The following Sunday, Judith hosted a family dinner. When I arrived, I noticed the table was set for 4, not 5. Warren quickly grabbed another place, muttering apologies about miscommunication. Throughout dinner, Judith dominated the conversation with stories about Lucas's day at the science exhibit. He was so interested in the pulley system. I told him his great-grandfather was an engineer, you know. It must be in his blood. Thomas had been an engineer. I opened my mouth to mention this, then closed it again, sensing it wouldn't make a difference. After dinner, Amelia showed me something on her phone, a notification from a group called Family Updates. I glimpsed several photos of Lucas that I had never seen. What's that group? I asked. Amelia quickly put her phone away. Just a little chat group Judith started so we can all stay updated. All except me, I said quietly. Mom, don't start. It's just easier this way with the 3 of us. Thanksgiving brought more subtle undermining. As I mashed the potatoes, Judith hovered nearby. Are you sure those potatoes were cooked long enough? Undercooked potatoes can harbor bacteria, you know. When I carved the turkey, she commented on knife safety with Lucas in the room. When I brought out the pumpkin pie, she questioned whether it had been refrigerated properly. The following week, Lucas couldn't find his favorite dinosaur figurine that he always kept at my house. I know it was here last week, I said, helping him look. Grandma Judith said it probably got lost because your house has too much clutter, Lucas replied innocently. That same afternoon, I overheard Judith speaking to Amelia in the kitchen when they thought I was in the backyard with Lucas. I've been reading about cognitive decline in older adults, Judith was saying. The first signs can be subtle. Misplaced items, forgetting recent conversations, irritability when questioned. Christmas brought another pointed incident. I had found a junior microscope set for Lucas, knowing his growing interest in science. "This says ages 8 and up," Judith said loudly, as Lucas unwrapped it. "He's only 4. There are tiny parts that could be choking hazards." "I plan to keep it at my house for supervised use," I explained. "I thought it would be something special we could explore together." "Well, better safe than sorry," Judith replied swiftly, removing the box. "We can put this away until he's older." In January, Amelia began scheduling doctor appointments, play dates, and special activities during my regular days with Lucas. Suddenly, Tuesdays weren't good then. Thursdays had conflicts too. Soon, I was down to occasional Wednesday mornings. One Wednesday, Lucas looked at me with his head tilted. "Grandma Judith says, you get confused sometimes. Is that why you forget things?" "What do I forget, sweetheart?" I asked, my heart sinking. He shrugged. "I don't know. She just tells Mommy that you forget stuff." That evening I confronted Amelia. "Are you and Judith discussing my mental state in front of Lucas?" "Mom, you're overreacting. Judith just mentioned that sometimes older adults need extra support. She's concerned about you. That's all." My friend Dorothy, who knew Judith from community board meetings, warned me over coffee. "That woman has a reputation, Giselle. Very charming in public, very controlling in private. She pushed out her first husband's entire family, from what I hear." I discovered Amelia had started attending Judith's church instead of the parish where she'd been baptized and confirmed. "Their youth program is better for Lucas," she explained when I asked. The final blow that winter came with the medicine mix-up. Lucas had seasonal allergies, and I had always kept his children's antihistamine at my house for when symptoms appeared. "Mom Judith says you gave Lucas the wrong medicine yesterday. She said the bottle at your house is expired." "That's impossible. I just bought it new last month," I protested. "Well, Lucas told her the medicine tasted different than usual. I tried documenting everything I did with Lucas in a notebook, recording what he ate, activities we did, even what books we read. When Amelia saw it, she frowned. "Why are you doing this, Mom? It seems so defensive." In March, Lucas's 5th birthday approached. I bought him a set of nature exploration tools, complete with a child-sized pair of binoculars. 3 days before the party, Amelia called. "About the birthday party. We're keeping it small this year. Just immediate family." "I am immediate family," I reminded her. "Of course, but Judith thinks a big party might be too overwhelming for Lucas. And for you, honestly, Mom. There will be a lot of kids and noise." I later saw the photos on social media. At least 20 children and their parents crowded Amelia's backyard. Judith stood in the center of several group pictures, helping Lucas blow out his candles, opening gifts with him. I recognized several of my own friends among the guests. When I texted Amelia afterward, her responses were cold and brief. "Did Lucas like his gift from me? Yes." "Did he have a good time?" "Fine." "Can I see him this week, busy?" The following Tuesday, I ran into Lucas and Judith at the grocery store during what would have been my time with him. "Grandma," he called out, then looked uncertainly between Judith and me. "Hello, Lucas," I said, fighting back tears. As they walked away, I heard him ask, "Are you mad at Mommy Grandma?" "Judith says you're jealous." April brought more isolation. At the community park, I overheard 2 mothers on a nearby bench. "That's her," one whispered not quietly enough. "Warren's mother-in-law, the one with the problems," the other asked. Judith says they're trying to handle it with dignity, but it's getting harder to manage the outbursts. Outbursts? I hadn't raised my voice to anyone in years. At the pharmacy, I ran into Denise, a nursing colleague from my hospital days. "Giselle, how are you?" she asked, her eyes filled with concern. "I heard about the memory issues. Are you getting support?" "Memory issues," I echoed. "I don't have any memory issues." Denise looked embarrassed. "Oh, I just thought. Never mind. Rumors you know. Good to see you looking well." The following Sunday, Warren called. His voice was hesitant, uncomfortable. "Giselle, we need to discuss Lucas's visits. Amelia and I think it might be best if someone else is present when you spend time with him." "Someone else," meaning Judith, I said flatly. "Well, either Judith or one of us, just until we're sure everything is stable." "Warren, what exactly do you think is unstable about me?" His silence was damning. Judith began organizing weekly family dinners every Sunday. Some weeks my invitation would arrive. Other weeks I would see the photos afterward online. No explanation was ever offered for the omissions. Easter Sunday, Lucas ran to greet Judith with enthusiasm, then visibly held back when I opened my arms to him. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I asked. He looked at the floor. "Nothing. Grandma Judith says you're the mean grandma sometimes." "Are you mean today?" That evening, I confronted Judith directly while Amelia and Warren were putting Lucas to bed. "I don't know what you're telling my grandson about me, but it needs to stop." Judith's face arranged itself into a mask of concern. "Giselle, we're all worried about these paranoid accusations. First, you claim I'm excluding you from family events. Now you think I'm turning Lucas against you. This is exactly the kind of behavior that concerns us." 2 days later, Amelia suggested I see a doctor. "Just to rule things out, Mom. Early dementia can be managed with proper care." "I do not have dementia," I said through gritted teeth. "The defensiveness is another symptom, you know," she replied gently, as if speaking to a child. I went to my doctor, Dr. Martin, the following week. After a thorough cognitive assessment, he found nothing wrong with my memory or mental processing. "You're as sharp as ever, Giselle," he assured me. "One of my healthiest patients in your age group." When I showed Amelia the report, she shrugged. "Those tests don't always catch early symptoms. Judith says her friend's mother seemed fine, too, until she wasn't." At Lucas's preschool pickup, which I was now permitted to do only once a month, his teacher, Miss Barnes, gave me an odd look. "Is everything all right at home, Mrs. Thompson?" she asked carefully. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "No reason. Lucas just seems confused sometimes about family dynamics." Later that week, I discovered Judith had introduced herself to the preschool staff as Lucas's primary grandmother and had added herself to the approved pickup list. She had even begun volunteering in his classroom twice a week. By May, Judith had become even bolder. "I'm happy to take over Giselle's grandparenting duties," she told Amelia in my presence. "It's really no trouble, and it would give her time to focus on her health." In June, Amelia and Warren announced they were moving. The new house was just 3 streets away from Judith, in the expensive Lake District neighborhood. "She found us a great deal," Warren explained, "and she's offered to help with the down payment. And it will be so much more convenient for Lucas," Judith added. "He can just walk over to my house after school when he's older." That summer, I learned Judith had been volunteering at Lucas's summer program, the very one I had suggested he attend. She had somehow taken credit for the idea. By July, Amelia was consulting Judith before making any decisions about Lucas, from what summer camps he should attend to what brand of sunscreen to use. One evening in August, I arrived early for a rare dinner invitation and overheard Judith speaking to Lucas in the backyard. "You need to be careful around confused older people," she was saying. "Sometimes they forget important things like taking their medicine or turning off the stove. That's why you can't stay alone with Grandma Giselle anymore." My hand shook with anger and hurt. When Judith saw me, she smiled sweetly. "Just having a little chat about safety. Weren't we, Lucas?" In September, Lucas developed hives after lunch at my house. I had made his favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwich, something I'd made him hundreds of times before. "He's allergic to strawberry jam now," Judith announced, when Amelia called me in a panic. "I told everyone last month. Giselle must have forgotten." Again. "You never told me about any strawberry allergy," I protested. "Amelia, you know I would never give him something he's allergic to." "The denial is concerning," Judith murmured. "Maybe we should consider having that neurologist appointment sooner." That was when I finally lost my temper. "I am not in denial. I am not confused. You are deliberately trying to push me out of Lucas's life, and I won't stand for it any longer." The outburst silenced the room. Judith placed a protective arm around Lucas. "I think we should go," Amelia said quietly. "Mom, please call me when you're feeling more yourself." The following day, Amelia called with the final blow. "Lucas told us he's afraid to be alone with you, Mom. He says you got very angry and it scared him." I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at the false accusations. "I'm sorry, but we have to respect his feelings. We'll need to pause your visits for a while." The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. My hands trembled as I opened it, already dreading its contents. Notice of Family Court Hearing Petition for Grandparent Visitation Restrictions. The petition, filed by Amelia and Warren Jackson, cited concerns for the minor child's safety and emotional well-being due to the mental decline and erratic behavior of the maternal grandmother. I sank into my kitchen chair, the formal legal language swimming before my eyes. They were taking me to court to legally prevent me from seeing my own grandson. When I tried calling Amelia, my call went straight to voicemail. My text messages showed as delivered, but remained unread. Warren's number did the same. In desperation, I called Dorothy, who suggested a support group for alienated grandparents that met at the community center on Thursday evenings. "Parental alienation is more common than you think," explained George, the group facilitator. "But grandparent alienation follows the same patterns. Document everything. Keep reaching out in non-confrontational ways. And consider legal representation." Before I could look into lawyers, another certified letter arrived, this one from Judith, not the court. In an effort to resolve family concerns without unnecessary legal intervention, a family meeting has been scheduled at the Pine Hill Community Center on Saturday at 2 p.m. Your attendance is requested to address ongoing issues regarding Lucas's well-being. When I arrived at the community center that Saturday, my heart sank. This was no small family meeting. At least 30 people filled the room. Extended family members, church friends, neighbors, even Lucas's preschool teacher. A projector and screen were set up at the front. Judith stood at a small podium, dressed as if for court in a conservative navy suit. Amelia and Warren sat in the front row, not meeting my eyes. Lucas was nowhere to be seen. "Thank you all for coming to support our family during this difficult time," Judith began. "As many of you know, we've been struggling with a sensitive situation regarding Lucas's maternal grandmother, Giselle." For the next 20 minutes, Judith presented a carefully curated slideshow titled Documenting Concerns. Photos of Lucas's minor injuries over the past year appeared on screen, each with a date and brief description. Bruised knee after fall at Giselle's house, scratch on arm after unsupervised outdoor play, allergic reaction to strawberries despite known allergy. Between these were photos of my kitchen, with circles around unsafe conditions, like a knife left on a counter or prescription bottles in my bathroom cabinet that Lucas couldn't possibly reach. Warren reluctantly stood to speak next. I want to say first that Giselle has always loved Lucas, but over the past year we've noticed changes. Forgetfulness, confusion about plans, irritability when questioned. My mother has extensive experience with elderly care through her charity work, and she recognized the signs immediately. Judith nodded sagely from her seat. The final blow came when Judith played a video on the screen. Lucas, sitting on what I recognized as Judith's sofa, looked uncomfortably at someone off camera. "Tell us how you feel at Grandma Giselle's house," Judith's voice prompted. "Sometimes scared," he said quietly. "Why scared, sweetheart?" "Because she forgets things and gets mad." His little face looked down, "and she doesn't listen to the rules like Grandma Judith says." Tears streamed down my face as Amelia stood next, her voice breaking. "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to say, but my mom doesn't seem to be the same person anymore. We've tried to accommodate, to supervise, to help, but her condition appears to be worsening. We're terrified of what might happen during an unsupervised visit." Several neighbors spoke about witnessing my confused state in public. Church friends expressed concern about my agitation during services. Even my next-door neighbor, Martin, claimed he'd heard me talking to myself in my garden. Finally, Judith returned to the podium for her dramatic conclusion. "It brings me no joy to say this, but Giselle deserves to lose access to Lucas for his safety and emotional well-being. Her declining cognitive state and refusal to acknowledge it put him at risk every moment they're alone together. As painful as this is, we must prioritize Lucas's safety over Giselle's feelings." The room murmured in sad agreement. I sat frozen, unable to believe what was happening. When I finally found my voice, it emerged as a croak. "None of this is true. I'm being systematically pushed out of my grandson's life by a master manipulator." The pitying looks that met this statement only confirmed what Judith had orchestrated. I now appeared exactly as she had portrayed me, desperate and paranoid. "I think we've heard enough," Judith said gently. "Giselle, we all want what's best for Lucas. I hope in time you'll come to accept the help you need." Warren's cousin Michael, who had been designated as the meeting facilitator, stood up. "Based on the evidence presented and the family's request, the consensus of those assembled is to support the petition for supervised visitation only with professional oversight." As if this random gathering of Judith's flying monkeys had any legal authority. "This isn't a court," I said, standing up. "You can't just vote to keep me from my grandson." "Mom, please don't make this harder," Amelia whispered. "We're trying to avoid a court battle that would only upset Lucas more." By holding a mockery of a trial, I asked incredulously. "This is exactly the kind of outburst we're concerned about," Judith interjected smoothly. "Perhaps Michael should escort Giselle out so we can continue discussing support options." The humiliation of being gently but firmly led from the room by Warren's cousin, a man who had enjoyed countless holiday meals at my table, was almost unbearable. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car and sobbed until I had no tears left. The weeks that followed were the darkest of my life. My phone calls went unanswered. My text messages were blocked. The cards and letters I sent to Lucas were returned unopened, with refused stamped across the envelopes. I drove past their house once, hoping to at least wave to Lucas if he was playing outside. Judith's car was in the driveway. 20 minutes later, a police officer knocked on my car window. "Ma'am, we've had a report of suspicious behavior. The homeowners have requested that you not approach the property. By Thanksgiving, I was contemplating selling my house and moving to Arizona to be near my sister. The pain of remaining in the same city, but completely cut off from Lucas, was unbearable. That night, as I packed away some of Lucas's toys from the guest room that had become his room at my house, I found his stuffed dinosaur Rexy wedged behind the dresser. It had been his comfort toy since infancy, the one he couldn't sleep without. I clutched it to my chest and finally broke completely, crying until exhaustion pulled me into restless sleep. The message that changed everything came through social media, a platform I rarely used. "Mrs. Thompson, you don't know me, but I'm Philip Jackson, Judith's son from her first marriage. We need to talk about what she's doing to your family. It's not the first time. We met at a coffee shop, 2 towns over, where we were unlikely to run into anyone who knew Judith." Philip was in his early 40s with Judith's sharp features softened by kind eyes. "My mother isolated my father's parents from me when I was Lucas's age," he explained. "By the time I was old enough to question it, my grandfather had passed away, and my grandmother had moved across the country. She told me they were dangerous, mentally, unstable, uninterested in me." "That's exactly what she's doing to me," I said, hands trembling around my coffee cup. "I reconnected with my paternal grandmother when I was in college. Found out my mother had fabricated everything, even going so far as to intercept birthday cards and gifts, then telling me they never sent anything." He pushed a folder across the table. "She did it to my wife's parents too, which is why we cut contact 10 years ago. She hasn't met our children." The folder contained printouts of old emails, social media posts, and family photographs documenting Judith's pattern of isolating children from competing grandparents. "She has a need to be the only influential adult in her grandchildren's lives," Philip explained. "She creates division plants, seeds of doubt, then positions herself as the savior. I've seen it happen 4 times now. What can I do? They've completely cut me off, and they're filing court papers. Document everything. Set up security cameras at your house. Watch for her mistakes. She gets sloppy when she feels she's winning." The next day, I had security cameras installed around my property, with special attention to the doors and windows. I also started a detailed journal of every interaction, every blocked call, every returned letter. 3 days later, the cameras captured something unexpected at 2 in the afternoon, when I was usually at my book club. A figure approached my side door, tried the handle, then peered in through the window. Even with the hat and sunglasses, I recognized Judith immediately. I checked the footage for the previous 2 weeks and discovered she had approached my house 4 times, always when I was regularly scheduled to be away. My garden club friend Teresa mentioned casually, "I saw Judith near your street last week. I thought maybe you two had patched things up." "We haven't," I said. "What day was this?" "Tuesday around noon. I was delivering flower arrangements from our fundraiser." Tuesday at noon, I had a standing physical therapy appointment for my knee. The security footage from that day showed Judith not just approaching my house, but actually entering my backyard through the gate. I contacted a family lawyer named Sandra Griffin, who specialized in grandparent rights. After reviewing my evidence, she advised me to keep gathering more. "Security footage of her entering your property without permission is concerning but not damning," Sandra explained. "We need to establish her pattern of deliberate alienation." With Philip's help, I recovered deleted photos from my phone pictures of Lucas and me together, happy and secure, directly contradicting Judith's narrative of an unstable relationship. Philip's investigation into his mother's past revealed she had alienated his father's mother using identical tactics. She even claimed my grandmother had early dementia, he said. Sound familiar? Through old social media accounts Judith had abandoned, we discovered a pattern. She would insinuate herself into families, identify the grandmother on the opposite side as competition, then systematically undermine that relationship. The most critical discovery came 3 weeks later. My security camera captured Judith using a key to enter my side door while I was at Sandra's office. The timestamp showed she remained inside for 23 minutes. When I returned home, nothing appeared disturbed, but something felt wrong. In my bathroom, I noticed my prescription medications had been rearranged in the cabinet. My blood pressure pills and over-the-counter sleep aids were now front and center, their safety caps slightly loose. 2 days later, I checked the security footage again and found Judith had returned, this time taking photos of my medication cabinet. She's creating evidence, Sandra said when I showed her, setting up a narrative about medication mismanagement. The final pieces fell into place when I remembered Lucas's tablet, a children's model he had left at my house before the cutoff. I had charged it and put it in his room untouched since. When I turned it on, it automatically connected to my Wi-Fi. The voice recording app contained dozens of files, most just Lucas singing or telling stories to himself. But 3 recordings made my blood run cold. The first, dated 4 months ago, captured Judith's voice clearly. "Remember what we practiced, Lucas? When I ask you how you feel at Grandma Giselle's house, what do you say?" Lucas's small voice, I say, sometimes scared. And why scared? Because she forgets things and gets mad. "Good boy. This is really helping your mommy make good decisions to keep you safe." The second recording, accidentally captured during what sounded like bedtime at Amelia's house, caught Judith speaking to my daughter. "The sooner we get this sorted out, the better for Lucas. Giselle is only going to get worse, you know. My friend's mother progressed from forgetfulness to complete disorientation in less than a year. We need to free your family from this burden before Lucas is old enough to be truly traumatized." The third and most damning recording was a conversation between Judith and Philip during an apparently tense visit. Lucas had accidentally left his tablet recording in Judith's living room. "You can't keep doing this," Mother Philip's voice stated clearly. "First my grandparents, then Diane's parents, now Warren's mother-in-law." "I don't know what you're talking about," Judith replied. "Yes, you do. You're systematically pushing Giselle out of Lucas's life, just like you did with every other grandparent who threatened your control." A pause, then Judith's voice coldly confident. "Warren and Amelia need my guidance with Lucas. That confused old woman is a liability. Within 6 months, she'll be completely out of the picture, and everyone will thank me for recognizing the signs of dementia before something tragic happened." "This is wrong, and you know it," Philip insisted. "Wrong would be allowing an unstable elderly woman unsupervised access to my grandson. I'm protecting Lucas, and if eliminating Giselle from his life is necessary, that's what I'll do." I sat on Lucas's bed tablet in hand, tears streaming down my face. But these weren't tears of despair. For the first time in almost a year, I felt something else. The burning clarity of vindication and the steely resolve of a grandmother fighting for her grandchild. For 2 weeks, Sandra and I prepared meticulously. We organized the evidence chronologically, backing up the recordings and security footage in multiple locations. I created a detailed timeline showing the progression of Judith's campaign against me with supporting documentation for each incident. "We're not just defending you against their allegations," Sandra explained. We're exposing a systematic campaign of parental alienation and elder defamation. I sent certified letters to Amelia Warren and Judith, requesting a formal family meeting at Street Marks Lutheran Church Community Room Neutral Territory, where Pastor Allen could serve as an independent facilitator. The letter specified that this meeting would include presentation of evidence and requested that the same people who had attended Judith's community center gathering be invited. "I don't expect a response," I told Sandra. "Judith will try to prevent this meeting from happening." I was right. Judith called Pastor Allen, claiming I was having an episode and the meeting should be canceled. Then she sent a group text to family and friends, suggesting the meeting was unnecessary and potentially distressing for everyone involved. What she didn't count on was my reputation in the community before her smear campaign. I had served on the hospital auxiliary board, volunteered at the literacy center, and organized the community garden program for 15 years. I personally called every person who had attended Judith's meeting, calmly requesting they hear my side before the court date. "I'm not asking you to take my side," I told each person, "just to listen with an open mind to evidence that wasn't presented at the first meeting." Pastor Allen, who had known me for 20 years, stood firm against Judith's attempts to cancel. "My church is open to all who seek truth and reconciliation," he told her. "Giselle has every right to present her perspective." I also invited several strategic additions, Dr. Martin, who had assessed my cognitive function, 2 former nursing colleagues with expertise in elder psychology, and most importantly, Philip and his wife Dana. The day of the meeting arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully in the blue suit I'd worn to Lucas's christening, my hands steady as I fastened my pearl earrings, a gift from Thomas on our 30th anniversary. When I arrived at the church, the parking lot was nearly full. Inside, almost 40 people filled the community room. Judith sat in the front row beside Amelia and Warren, her face a mask of concern. She had clearly expected me to back down, not to escalate by gathering an even larger audience. Pastor Allen opened with a prayer for wisdom and understanding, then explained the format. Judith presented her concerns at the previous meeting. Today, Giselle will have the same opportunity to share her perspective, after which we will open for questions and discussion. Judith immediately objected. "Pastor, I'm concerned this format will only distress an already confused woman. Perhaps a smaller setting would be more appropriate." "I appreciate your concern, Judith," Pastor Allen replied firmly. "But Giselle has requested this format specifically to address the same audience who heard your presentation." I approached the small podium, my folder of evidence in hand, heart-pounding but resolve unwavering. "Thank you all for coming today," I began. "Many of you have known me for decades long before the recent allegations about my mental competence. For 40 years I served as a pediatric nurse, caring for thousands of children. I raised my daughter Amelia with love and have cherished every moment as Lucas's grandmother." I looked directly at Judith. "What you may not know is that for the past year, I have been the target of a deliberate campaign to remove me from my grandson's life, orchestrated by someone with a documented history of exactly this behavior." For the next 20 minutes, I methodically presented my timeline, starting with the first subtle criticisms and progressing through the increasingly serious allegations. Using 2 large poster boards, I displayed a chart showing the contradiction between Judith's claims and the documented reality. Judith claimed I allowed Lucas unsupervised access to medications. I explained. Yet my prescriptions were always stored in a locked cabinet. That is, until recently. I played the security footage showing Judith entering my house and rearranging my medication cabinet, then taking photos on a subsequent visit. A murmur ran through the room. Warren sat up straighter, his brow furrowed as he looked at his mother. Judith claimed, "I experienced episodes of confusion in public," I continued. Yet not one person reported such behavior until after Judith moved to Portland and began suggesting it to others. I nodded to Dr. Martin, who stood briefly. "Doctor, Martin has provided a formal assessment of my cognitive function, finding me to be, in his words, cognitively intact with no signs of impairment. This report has been available to my family for months, but was dismissed as inadequate." Warren's discomfort was now visibly increasing. He glanced repeatedly between me and his mother. But perhaps the most disturbing evidence is how Lucas was coached to express fear of me. I said, my voice steady, despite the pain. This recording was accidentally captured on Lucas's tablet, which remained at my house after visits were terminated. The room fell completely silent as Lucas's small voice played, followed by Judith's instructions on what to say about me. Several people gasped when Judith's voice clearly praised him for helping make good decisions to keep you safe. Judith stood up, her face flushed. That recording is obviously manipulated. Giselle is technically savvy enough to doctor audio files. Pastor Allen gently asked her to allow me to finish my presentation. The second recording played, revealing Judith's conversation with Amelia about freeing your family from this burden. Amelia's face crumpled as she heard the words, her eyes filling with tears. Then came the final devastating recording of Judith admitting to Philip her intention to eliminate me from Lucas's life completely. "If eliminating Giselle from his life is necessary, that's what I'll do." Warren stood up abruptly. "Is this real, Mother? Did you say these things?" Judith's composure finally cracked. "They're taken out of context. I was protecting Lucas from a deteriorating situation." "The context is quite clear," I replied calmly. "And you are not the first grandmother Judith has targeted." I nodded to Philip, who stood up from the back row. "My name is Philip Jackson, Judith's son from her first marriage. What you're witnessing is a pattern my mother has repeated with 4 different families, including my own." Judith's face went pale. "Philip has his own agenda. He's been estranged from me for years." "Yes," he replied steadily, "because you did exactly this to my wife's parents, and we refuse to let you isolate our children from yet another set of grandparents." The room erupted in shocked conversation. Pastor Allen had to call for order. Warren approached the front, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Mother, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been deliberately turning Lucas against his grandmother." Judith's facade finally shattered completely. "I did what was necessary. That woman would have poisoned him against me with her outdated ideas and excessive permissiveness. I am the only one who truly understands what Lucas needs." The tablet recording played again. This time, the damning line clear for everyone, "Your old grandma doesn't deserve you." Warren's voice was quiet but firm. "That's enough, Mother. Tell the truth now, or I swear we will never speak again." Judith looked around the room at the faces that had once been firmly on her side, now filled with shock and growing anger. Her perfectly constructed narrative had collapsed in minutes. "You're all being manipulated," she shouted, grabbing her purse. "This is exactly what she wants to turn you against me after everything I've done for this family." She stormed toward the door, pausing only to point a finger at me. "This isn't over, Giselle. Not by a long shot." As the door slammed behind her, Amelia rose slowly from her seat and walked toward me, tears streaming down her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "What have I done?" The church community room emptied slowly. people stopping to squeeze my hand or offer quiet apologies as they left. Pastor Allen gently suggested that the remaining family members move to his office for privacy. Warren sat with his head in his hands while Amelia sobbed quietly beside me on the small office sofa. Philip remained his presence, a silent testimony to the pattern we had exposed. "I believed her completely," Amelia whispered. "She had an explanation for everything, documentation for every concern. I thought I was protecting Lucas." "She's been perfecting these tactics for decades," Philip explained gently. "Each time she gets more sophisticated, more convincing." Warren looked up, his face haggard. I knew something wasn't right, but I kept telling myself she was just being protective, that her experience with senior care made her more aware of the signs we were missing. He turned to me, his eyes red. "Giselle, I can't begin to apologize enough." "What happens now?" Amelia asked, her voice small. "Now we begin rebuilding," I said, taking her hand. "One day at a time." The immediate aftermath was painful and awkward. Judith left dozens of voicemails for Warren and Amelia, alternating between tearful apologies and vicious accusations. She finally departed for her sister's home in Florida when it became clear her manipulation had been fully exposed. 3 days after the meeting, I saw Lucas for the first time in nearly 2 months. He was hesitant, confused by the sudden change. "Is Grandma Judith sick?" he asked innocently. "Daddy said she had to go away for a while." "No, sweetheart," I replied carefully. "Sometimes adults have disagreements they need to work out, but I want you to know that I have missed you very, very much." He allowed a quick hug, but kept glancing at Amelia for reassurance. The damage would not be undone in a single visit. Dr. Lisa Feldman, a family therapist specializing in parental alienation, began working with us the following week. She explained that Lucas would need time and patience. "He's been told repeatedly that his grandmother is unsafe, forgetful, even frightening," she explained. "Those messages don't disappear overnight, even when the source is removed." Warren discovered that his mother had similar histories with 3 other family relationships: his father's parents, Philip's wife's family, and most recently, a cousin's-in-law's. Each time she had systematically isolated the children from the competing grandparents, using increasingly sophisticated tactics. We established a careful schedule of visits, short, at first always with either Amelia or Warren present. Each week, Lucas grew slightly more comfortable, remembering our old games and traditions. The hardest conversation came when Amelia and I finally sat down alone a month after the church meeting. "I failed you, Mom," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I believed terrible things about you, the person who has always been there for me. You were manipulated by someone who has spent decades perfecting her techniques," I replied, though the hurt still ran deep. "But yes, I needed you to believe in me, to at least question what was happening." "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make this right," she promised. "We don't need to focus on the rest of your life," I told her. "Let's focus on today, on rebuilding our trust, one conversation at a time." Warren and I had our own healing to do. He had enabled his mother's behavior too passive to question her increasingly controlling presence in their lives. "I've always deferred to strong women," he admitted during a family therapy session. "First my mother, then Amelia when things were good. Then back to my mother when she created doubt. I need to find my own voice, especially when it comes to protecting my family." After much discussion, we decided not to pursue legal action against Judith. The family trauma had been extensive enough without prolonged court battles. She's lost access to her grandson and exposed her manipulation to an entire community, Sandra advised. "Sometimes social consequences are more effective than legal ones." Through the grandparent support group, I connected with other grandparents who had experienced similar alienation. Sharing my story helped them recognize the warning signs in their own family dynamics, and their support helped me continue healing. A surprising reconciliation came when Warren reconnected with his estranged brother Philip. The two men had been separated by their mother's manipulations for nearly a decade. "She always told me you wanted nothing to do with our family," Warren admitted during their first dinner together. "And she told me you were completely under her control," Philip replied. We both believed her version instead of simply talking to each other. 6 months after the confrontation, Lucas stayed overnight at my house for the first time since the ordeal began. As I tucked him into bed in his room, he clutched the dinosaur stuffed animal I had found during my darkest days. "Grandma," he asked thoughtfully, "why did Grandma Judith tell me you were scary?" I took a deep breath, having prepared for this inevitable question. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings that make them do wrong things. Grandma Judith wanted to be the only grandmother in your life, and that wasn't fair to you or to me. He considered this. Daddy says she has problems in her heart that make her tell stories that aren't true. That's a good way to understand it, I agreed, but you don't need to worry about that anymore. The family established new traditions and communication practices. A shared digital calendar kept everyone informed about Lucas's activities. Weekly family dinners rotated between our homes. Most importantly, we developed a practice of direct communication, no triangulation allowed. My own journey involved learning about toxic relationships and establishing healthier boundaries. I realized that my desire to avoid conflict had made me an easier target for Judith's manipulation. 3 months later, I encountered Judith at the grocery store. She had returned to Portland briefly to pack up her house, which was now for sale. Our eyes met across the produce section. For a moment, I considered confrontation, listing all the pain she had caused the relationships she had nearly destroyed. Instead, I simply nodded and turned away. My reaction wasn't about her anymore. It was about my own peace, my own journey forward. On the 1-year anniversary of our family reconciliation, we gathered at my house for a celebration. Lucas, now 6, raced around the backyard with Warren's nieces and nephews, the cousins he had never known before Judith's exposure. As we sat on the patio watching the children play, Amelia squeezed my hand. "I never imagined we could come back from the brink like this," she said. "The truth has power," I replied. "It burns through deception eventually, if we're brave enough to face it." The lessons I learned through this ordeal run deep. Evidence matters when confronting manipulation. Trust can be damaged, but also carefully rebuilt. Love perseveres even through the darkest times, and forgiveness does not mean allowing someone to harm you again. As I watch my grandson grow secure in the knowledge that our relationship is healing more each day, I understand that truth is indeed the light that burns through darkness. It may take time to emerge, but when it does, nothing can stand against it. Have you ever had to stand up for the truth when everyone believed lies about you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. And if this story about family manipulation and healing touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that the truth will eventually prevail. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest battles are fought within our own families, but truth and love are always worth fighting for.